Someone told me it was 12 o'clock. For those of you I have not met, my name is Cindy Peterson. I'm president of Downtown Rotary. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. While you're standing, please join me in reciting the four-way test. Of the things we think, say, or do, first, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? Fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? I'd like to invite Rabbi Mendel up for our invocation. Rabbi?
Almighty God, look favorably upon us gathered here today at Downtown Rotary and bestow upon us, our families, and all citizens of Sioux Falls the joy of life, good health, and prosperity. Bless us with wisdom and understanding that we may be close to you and your holy ways. In ancient times, Jews gathered in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem once every 7 years for an event called Hakel, which means assembly. As is stated in Deuteronomy 31:12, assemble the people, the men, the women, and the children, so that they hear and so that they learn and fear God. The king would read verses from the Bible containing God's instructions for life about social responsibility, tithing the crops, and caring for the poor. The people came away reunited and re-inspired of God's constant presence in their lives, to be thankful for all the divine blessings of health, success, and happiness, and to be better to each other. This year is the anniversary of the biblical once in 7 year gathering, Hakel. Although Hakel cannot be observed in its biblical format in the absence of the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, its energy is available to us, just like all biblical ideas, continue to be spiritually and personally relevant everywhere and at all times. The Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Schneerson, explained that today everyone can inspire people around them. It is not enough to perfect our own attitudes and behaviors. Rather, each one of us can and should be an influencer of goodness and kindness in a pleasant and welcoming manner. Whenever two people meet, a third shall also benefit. Please, God, give us strength to be always mindful of your presence and of our ability to elevate the quality of life of those around us, that we truly care for society and our environment, do more acts of charity, and work together to make your world a better place for all. May Sioux Falls serve as a beacon of light, strength, and moral courage as we do our part in preparing the world for an era of global peace and tranquility. As King David said in Psalms, may there be peace in your walls, tranquility in your palaces. For the sake of my brethren and my companions, I shall now speak of peace in you. For the sake of the house of the Lord our God, I shall beg for goodness for you. May this occur speedily in our times. Amen.
I would like to welcome our guests and thank those who invited them. We don't always have a chance to do so, but today we will take the time to have our members who brought guests do some introductions. Where is the microphone? So I can make sure I make you run all the way across the room. All right, we're ready to rock and roll. Joel Sylvester, where are you? Joel, oh, right there. And Joel, you've brought a guest.
My guest is Michelle Garrigan. She just got in. She was presenting at USD today, so she literally just walked in the door. So I'm glad you made it on time. So she's with Firelink Digital, and welcome.
Jared, are you close by? You have a couple guests, I think. All right.
Hello. Good afternoon, fellow Rotarians. I have two guests with me today, Jake Brown-Nagel from KLJ and Michelle Klobasser from TSP. And they're very familiar with our Sioux Falls Airport. And so we're here just to hear more about that. So welcome.
Thank you. Welcome. Luke Lindberg, where did you land? You have guests.
Thank you, President Cindy. Fellow Rotarians, I'm pleased to introduce Kathleen Ireland, who's here with me today. She is the new program director at the South Dakota Trade Association. We are thrilled to have her on board. She just joined us a couple weeks ago. She previously is from South Africa, where she worked for South African Airlines. And so her South African accent makes her infinitely more sophisticated than I am. Please come say hi to her when you have a chance. Thanks so much.
Thank you for being here. Dan Kipley, you have a guest.
Thank you, President Cindy and fellow Rotarians. I'd like to introduce Lisa Tesla from Precision Leadership Group. She's been a friend of mine for over a couple years. We'll leave it at that.
Thank you for being here. We have a guest of South Dakota Public Broadcasting. Eric Erickson, is that your doing? Right behind you, Angie. Oh, oh, that's media. Oh, hi, media. Thank you for being here today. Okay. Tom Hurlbert, you have a guest today. Tom.
Thank you, President Cindy. Members, this is Kyle Raff, my business partner and principal architect at Co-op Architecture with us today. So thank you.
Thank you for being here. Steve Watson, I think you're close by. You have a guest.
My guest today is David Mao, who's a business banker with Dakota Bank.
Thank you for being here. Luke Tibbetts, you have a guest.
Thank you, President Cindy. I would like to welcome Jordan Huseman, Senior Business Banking Officer with First Premier Bank.
Thank you for being here today. Lynn, you have a guest. Do we have two Lynns? Lynn Keller-Forbes?
President Cindy, fellow Rotarians, I would like to introduce Melissa Fassell. She's a commercial banker at the First National Bank in Omaha.
Glad to have you today. While you make your way towards the front, is Becky DeWitt's somewhere in the path? Becky has a guest. Perfect.
Today I have with me Jenna Harris. She's the policy advisor to Mayor Tim Haken's office. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Up front.
Thank you, President Cindy. Stand up, my friend. This is Rick Noby. I don't think anybody knows you, but he's here. He's a former mayor of this town and a big DJ for many years on radio, and kind of a world traveler, what they call around the loop. He's a looper. He just. We'll welcome Rick Noby.
Thank you for being here. Matt Paulson, you have a guest. Matt Paulson has a guest. Maybe not. Others came in while I had already taken the sheet. Who else has brought a guest? Please raise your hand so everyone can be introduced. Dean Karski has a guest.
I brought my guest today is my father. My parents are in town babysitting their great grandson, my grandson. So my mom's at home babysitting, and I asked my dad to lunch today. So he's a guest of mine today. So
I love it. Welcome. Has anyone else brought a guest that we can introduce today? Well, then we will shift our introductions to our junior Rotarians. Kayla, could you come on up? We have 3 that you get to hear from today.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to introduce you to 3 accomplished students this afternoon. Mira is going to make her way this way as we introduce Mira McIntyre from Washington High School. My sheet was not long enough for her 16 clubs and 12 activities, so we're just going to say 16 clubs and 12 activities. She is a volunteer at the Washington Pavilion enjoys skateboarding, embroidering, baking, spending time with her family, and plans to go to STSU for political science and global issues to focus on law and politics. So please help me welcome Mira McIntyre.
Thank you all so much for having me this month. It's been a complete joy and pleasure for me to be here. As she said, I'm a member of quite a few clubs and activities at school, but one will always hold the biggest place in my heart long after I graduate. I've been lucky to be a member of the speech and debate community for 11 years now, when my mom, who is also my coach, took me along to her with a tournament when I was 7 years old. Through this community, I have learned a lot of valuable lessons that have shaped me into who I am today. Last month, my lifelong friend and co-team captain Jack was here, and he spoke to you about the values of this community and what it teaches young adults and why it is so important to put people in these different programs. I won't be a broken record of what he has already told you all, but he and I both agree on a lesson that is very important to us. The standout lesson that we have learned from speech and debate in our lives is one of empathy and giving voices to those who are often overlooked and left voiceless. As a speech student, I have a little bit of reputation in my community and an excellent platform such as this that reaches a lot of people. And I think that those of us with those platforms should understand that it may come time to advocate and help out for each other. When we try to understand the feelings of others instead of tearing them down for the things they cannot change, this can change the lives of many. And so if we give them the opportunity to shine for themselves, this can transform the way they look at the world every day. Today, I would like to share with you a small lesson of empathy, using a wonderful program at my school, for example, and all the different skills that I have learned as a speech and debate student. Out of that very long list of activities I'm a part of, none of them are truly voiceless, whether athletic, fine arts, or academic. The likelihood is if I shared the names of these clubs with you, you would know the large majority of them. So when I was writing this speech for what I would say today, I was stuck in a very tough situation. What can I talk about to all of these people that is informative and interesting and fresh? How can I use this platform to make good for other people? I have been very blessed to share the stories that need to be heard but are often overlooked. Then I knew that what I wanted to share with you today is very important, and it's some of the most outspoken and unspoken voices in my school today. In the fall of 2021, an incredible program was started in our school's special education program, led by amazing teacher and even more wonderful person, Nate Alfson. The Warrior Printing Press was made a community that creates handmade t-shirts available for sales that in turn teaches students with intellectual disabilities about the working skills they will apply to the community after they have graduated. I have gotten absolutely honored to work kind of closely with Mr. Alfson and speak to him about what he hopes to do. And he was so kind to let me borrow some of their products to show for all of you today. This past fall, they made t-shirts for our custodial staff for Custodian Appreciation Week and sold them not only among our school but to other schools with their school colors. And things like these are made by our special education students in that program. And then this was kind of their very first project they made this past fall in collaboration with our Best Buddies program that says the Warrior Printing Press. And this is some good stuff, you guys. These are very quality t-shirts. When they make a profit from these shirts, they also learn about making wages in order to get goods and services. With this lesson, they hope to raise the money for things they can all enjoy, like a pizza social or a bowling party this year. The printing press has created some wonderful products sold throughout our community to other Sioux Falls schools and within our buildings, 100% made by special education students at Washington High School. Mr. Nate, as the kids call him, walked me through the process of how he and his kids make their products, as it goes from the order of the product to the finished good hot off their presses, and what he hopes to achieve from it. He told me that not all of these kids want to go into career paths that society has often molded for children like them. They want to achieve dreams just like everyone else, and we want people to understand that. Nate says he knows the value of teaching kids these skills, and that in turn creates them into more prepared humans for their adulthoods. He told me stories of his kids who are passionate about certain fields like sports and arts and science, and how they dream to be a part of those fields in their adulthood. But the story that stuck with me the most that Nathan shared with me was one of empathy. He told me that when the people around us decide to take chances in understanding our situations and feelings using genuine empathy and give the voices to people instead of silencing them, it becomes a win win for everyone involved. When we feel even a small bit of empathy for one another when someone struggles, we can provide the helping hand up that could change someone's demeanor for a very long time. For example, by founding this printing press group, it makes us, especially someone like me, understand what these special education students are feeling in their specific mindsets because they put so much effort into making these products and the joy that we get out of them. We learn to understand the way they feel about this process and how they want to work and succeed with the talents that they have been given. I think this is the most pure and easy example of empathy I have ever seen. It is a cycle of love that we can all share with each other as human beings. The Warrior Printing Press has allowed people like them to have a voice, and it's given me a short story to share with you all today. They are passionate and talented, very human beings, and we learn to understand the way they feel. When I told Nate this past week that I intended on speaking here today about his kids and his program, and that I plan to dedicate the very generous donation I get from this great organization to his program instead of any program that I am a part of, he smiled and he thanked me in a way that I will never forget for the rest of my life. Because I felt empathy for his situation and the situation of those students who are often voiceless, I understood that he was joyful at the difference that this makes for kids that he teaches. I understood that he was relieved that someone finally made an effort to understand what he is trying to do with this program. And most of all, he was very touched that somebody wants to give this voice to his kids and made the steps to have empathy for them. I'm so lucky to have come here this month and used my voice to give the stories of people like Nate and the special education students that are part of their community and often get left voiceless. A common theme we have in the speech and debate community is imagine what the world would be like if we were just able to understand each other regardless of any disability or roadblock hindering us. Someone wise once said, "It is extremely powerful to hear someone say that I get you and I understand you and I see why you feel this way." I hope today I have taught you all to have maybe just a little empathy for each other no matter what, because you never know what that could do for somebody. I hope today that an overlooked group such as this can inspire you to look out for the life in all and those little and quiet voices that don't get enough attention that they deserve, and to amplify those voices because of the empathy you feel in your heart for them. Let us all go forth and help each other out with empathy and love, just like my warrior community does for Nate and his students. Thank you all for having me this month.
Thank you, Mira. That was wonderful. Our next student we're going to meet is Julia Cambites from Roosevelt High School. She'll make her way up here. She is involved in debate, DECA, art, pep club, and enjoys volunteering at a haunted house in the fall and Sanford in the summer. Julia works with her dad in the summer, who owns DLH Communications, and really enjoys art, drawing, crafting, reading, hiking, and music. Julia plans to attend SDSU to study microbiology and plans to be a medical researcher after graduation. Please help me welcome Julia.
Hey everyone, hard to follow up that speech, huh? But yeah, so similar to that speech, my speech is also about my experience with the speech and debate community, except it's more geared toward the debate side. Yeah, so my first experience with debate occurred during the end of my 8th grade year. We had to research and decide whether or not we believed efforts should be made for humans to eventually live on Mars. Of course, this idea seems a bit silly now that I'm older and understand how government money and tax dollars actually work. But after a few hours of Google searching, I eventually agreed that the US should put money towards space exploration for humans to inhabit Mars. Although my thoughts on the subject are slightly different now, this experience was the first time in my entire life that I'd ever built my belief based on my own research and experience. Now, flash forward to the beginning of my freshman year. I might as well have been a deer in the headlights the way I couldn't decide what my next move was going to be. At that time, everything seemed so much bigger than the middle school I was used to. So when my friend suggested that I join the debate team, I made the executive decision to leap out of the car's trajectory and attend the debate team meeting. Now back to the present. I have been on that same debate team at Roosevelt High School for the past 4 years. Just as suddenly as my debate journey started, my last tournament crept up on me too. So with more time in my previously hectic schedule, I have begun to reflect on my entire debate experience. And with this reflection, I have realized just how many important lessons debate has actually instilled in me. There are the obvious lessons, like how I learned to be a better speaker and how I learned to research various current events without using Wikipedia as a reliable source. But the lessons that mean the most to me are the ones that aren't so obvious. What I love the most about debate is that it taught me to be a better version of myself. Today's world is built on community, but is being ripped apart by polarization. I too used to believe almost everything I heard on the internet was fact, when in reality, almost all of it has hidden motive and an innate bias designed to separate people. Debate has made me less blind to this fact. I now realize that not everything is as black and white as I once believed it was. I can now accept the fact that everyone has an opinion and that many of those opinions are very different from my own. Because debate and many brutal hours of speech that has put me through, I now understand the value of discourse and universal education. Even disagreements still end with a firm, respectable handshake because that's what South Dakota debate has taught me, the importance of diverse beliefs. Is this understanding that has allowed me to create a multitude of relationships with people coming from various backgrounds, many of whom are my closest friends today. Not only have I learned to be more open-minded with others' views, I've also learned to be more confident in my own. 14-year-old Julia was very shy and would never have felt comfortable enough to speak to you all today on a stage. But debate gave me a very special gift. It gifted me the resources I needed to succeed. My wonderful coaches gave me the courage to speak my mind and assured me that even if I were to fail miserably today, there would still be another debate tournament next weekend. My peers believed in me and helped me to realize that my words and all of my hard work did have meaning. And the constant support I received helped me to gain confidence in myself because I finally had a place I knew I belonged. If it weren't for debate and the amazing community that supports the activity, I would never have become who I am today. In hindsight, 8th grade me would never have even considered the idea of joining debate. But now, only a few months from graduation, I thank the event from the bottom of my heart because it taught me how to be a better me. Thank you. Thank you, Julia. I think your worries of failing miserably were not worth your time. That was a wonderful job. Thank you. Okay, and last but not least, today we are meeting with Ashlyn Kelleher, also from Roosevelt High School. Ashlyn is involved in Best Buddies, Cancer Awareness, Link Crew, Pep Club, track, soccer, and salsa. Ashlyn volunteers through Salsa and Kids Against Hunger, Lifescape, and is involved at a Sioux Falls First Daycare and Sanford as a nursing assistant. Ashlyn enjoys playing soccer, baking, track, reading, organizing, and hiking. Ashlyn plans to study at Augustana University to play soccer and focus on exercise science with the goal of becoming a pediatric physical therapist. Please help me welcome Ashlyn.
Okay, so obviously I'm not in the speech and debate that the other two are. So mine's not as good, but so soccer, the sport I've played since kindergarten, still playing now, and will continue to play at the collegiate level. It is a sport I am most dedicated to and deeply passionate about. I'm forever grateful for my big sister who introduced me to the sport, or should I say, who I copied every little thing from, including many other activities, but most importantly, soccer. Growing up, I just enjoyed it because it was fun, exciting. I could meet new people and even travel to different places. Now, I look back at all of the tiny lessons my coaches or parents told me and realize how much of an impact they have on me now. Those lessons have shaped me into the person I am today. Today, I am compassionate, competitive, brave, loving, fearless, kind, caring, and bold. I have grown so many friendships that I hope will last a lifetime and an endless amount of memories I hope to never forget. One main lesson I've learned is that your passion is going to come with sacrifices, but the support, success, and lifelong friendships you have will oftentimes make those sacrifices worth it. Now I'm going to share a little story with you all. So last year, after a rocky start to our high school soccer season, I had an unsure feeling about the rest of the season, of how the rest of the season would go. I found myself with no hope, but continued to play with the passion I always have for this sport. It was the last game of our regular season, which also happened to be senior night. One of our top senior players broke her collarbone with 10 minutes left in the game. It devastated us all, and this is when I lost all hope we would even make it past the first round of soccer playoffs. In previous years, we had pretty good success. We lost in the semifinals my freshman year,
and then got runner-up my sophomore year. But as each crucial game went by, we played our hearts out and made it to the championship game for the second year in a row. This time I thought to myself, it's going to be different. I'm going to walk out a state champ and have one of those super fancy, expensive rings that no one ever wears after receiving it. And so, after full regulation, 2 overtimes, and penalty kicks later, also like 2.5, 3 hours if you're counting the time, the Roosevelt girls soccer team was state champs. It was a super special moment and memory I'll have for the rest of my life. The joy and happiness this sport has given me is unmeasurable, but I'm never going to forget the people who have gotten me to this point now, and all of the grit, hard work, and dedication I've put into this sport over the years. But soccer is my passion, and I hope to someday be able to share that same passion with my children and younger kids just getting into this sport. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your stories. We just have such amazing young talent right here in Sioux Falls, and I hope every single one of you makes Sioux Falls your home when you are done with college and continue your life journey. I would now like to invite our panelists to the stage. While they make their way, I'm going to remind you that we're halfway through our Downtown Rotary Show the Love membership drive. And fellow Rotarians, you have shown the love. Since February 1st, you have invited over 50 individuals to Monday meetings. And as of today, I think it's 8 individuals have submitted applications. So thank you so much for doing that. We're well on our way to reaching our goal and propelling into the one of the top 20 clubs in the world. So just a reminder, the drive ends March 17th. Between now and then, all applications submitted will have their $100 joining fee waived. And all of you sponsors out there, you are in a drawing to be entered to win free lunch every week for the rest of the Rotary year as a way of saying thank you. But now it's program time. Today is all about airport master planning and aviation insights. Our panelists include Rotarian Dan Letter. I said that wrong. Letellier. All right. Dan's hanging with us today. He's with the Sioux Falls Regional Airport, and Tom Schauer with Mead Hunt. President-elect and Program Chair Eric Ellefson is today's moderator. Take it away.
Well, thank you, President Cindy. I got to start by just saying the 3 young ladies that just spoke, as a girl dad, talk about a proud moment for any dads that are in the room. You guys are dynamite, so thanks for joining us. Now, as Cindy said, we're going to talk airport today, and there's a lot of things happening out at the airport. As of the, I don't know, 4th or 5th one of these that I've done, this is probably the easiest one I had to prep for. I love aviation. I'm a pilot myself. Also sit on the Sioux Falls Regional Airport Authority Board. So I want to bring that out and make sure that everybody knows that that's the angle that I'm bringing to this conversation. But specifically, airports in Sioux Falls, obviously throughout the state, are huge economic growth engines. And we're going to talk a little bit today on how some of the changes and the planning that's going into place right now will continue to speak to the growth and the economic engine that Sioux Falls has and the state of South Dakota has in Sioux Falls Regional Airport. So before we get started, let me share a few facts. A lot of growth has been happening. And even with a pandemic in play, here's a few things about the Sioux Falls Airport that you might not know. There's currently 14 destinations across 5 airlines that have direct, nonstop destinations. In the past 2 years, we've added 6 new destinations alone. Fort Lauderdale, Punta Gorda, Nashville, Austin, San Diego, and Santa Ana. And then recently, last week, I believe, we announced we have a new LA destination that's been there before, but it hasn't been there for about 2 years. So a new Allegiant flight that'll be flying direct to LA here in the next this summer. Specifically, let's talk some numbers around enplanements. So enplaned passengers out of Sioux Falls in 2022 was just over 610,000 enplanements. That's total passengers, about double that. So 1.25 million roughly, which is ultimately about 21% better than 2021. So if you think about 2019 being just a record year for the state of South Dakota and Sioux Falls Regional, we then went through a pandemic. It took us 1 year to really turn that back around. And 2022 is even better than that. So we're continuing to show progress. Needless to say, there's a lot of growth and economic kind of development that are taking place within just the Sioux Falls Regional Airport alone. So enough about the stats. Let's talk about something that a lot of people probably feel right now. If you've been traveling at all or driven by the airport, parking. We're going to start with parking. So I can't see the slides, but I'm going to do my best here to transition through them. There's the economic engine. Let's stop there. I made a mistake. This is a state of South Dakota did an economic impact study. And with that study, the last line is really kind of the main thing that I want to share for you. Overall, all airports in the state of South Dakota generated roughly $900 million in economic development and economic impact for the state. Sioux Falls Regional alone accounted for $400 million of that $900 million. So to say that we have a driver in this city is an understatement when you think about the totality of the dollars that are generated across the aviation community throughout this state. With that said, now let's jump to parking. So Dan, talk to us about what's going on with parking right now.
I really hate to talk about parking because I think I'm a parking manager more than an airport manager. But yeah, you mentioned the growth in traffic. That has a direct impact on the amount of parking that's necessary at the airport. 2022 was a record year for employments and also the use in parking. Starting out this year, January, our employments were up 21% already, and the amount of cars in the parking lot increased 25%. And then going into February, the first week we were 30% over last February, and heading into the very busy President's Day holiday weekend, which generated a lot of concerns that we weren't going to have enough parking. I did flatten off a little bit, but huge demand in traffic that drives parking. It's an effort that we've been focused on for the last 10, 12 years. So as the population has grown, more people traveling, more need for parking. And so we've 2011 reconfigured our main parking lot. The next year we added 800 spaces to a new economy lot. A few years later, looking for future decisions on parking, whether to make it more surface parking or vertical parking. The board elected to go forward with a parking garage, which we'll talk about shortly. In 2020, we added another 600 spaces onto the economy lot, and this year we'll add another 500 more just to make sure we have enough spaces next winter for the spaces we'll lose during the parking garage. So it's quite a challenge, but it's very important to us. It's easily our largest revenue source. Over 45% of our income is generated from parking. So it's something that we're focused on. And we'll talk about this parking garage that we're very excited about that we'll jump into pretty soon.
Yeah. If you're anything like me and you've sat and looked at parking in general, when I first came on the board, my first question was, why would we consider a parking ramp when we have Uber and we have Lyft and we have all of these kind of transitional parking options that are coming into play? And one thing that I was really educated on early on is that 67% of our actual traffic that utilizes the parking areas within this Sioux Falls Regional Airport are actually from outside Minnehaha and Lincoln County. So as a resident, I defaulted to say, well, I get an Uber when I go down to the airport. But when you think about if I was from Viborg, or if I was from Brookings, or if I was from Watertown, or anyone that's coming into this state, Iowa, to utilize the airport, oftentimes they're driving and they're parking. So with that, we've got 3,100 spots roughly right now.
Yep, 3,100.
So 3,100, and if you've driven by recently, every single one of those is taken up. Dan, talk to us about that new parking ramp, what we're seeing on the slides here next to us.
Yeah, so numerous studies, a lot of hand-wringing, but eventually 2 years ago, we board elected to move forward with the parking garage, working with our folks, TSP and Kimley Horn. Developed a 4-level parking structure that'll go right in front of the building where the short-term lot is. Just under 1,000 spaces. The bottom level will have hourly parking, but the other 3 floors will have covered long-term parking. It will, construction is scheduled to start April 3rd. That will displace a fair amount of parking. So even though the passenger loads go down, the kind of need for parking subsides a little bit. We'll have a lot fewer parking spaces to work with during construction. But pretty excited about it. It's well designed, added a lot of aesthetic improvements, so it's not just a concrete block in front of the terminal building. And it will have a skyway connection from the 2nd level into the main terminal building that we're really excited about. Henrik Carlson is the general contractor, anxious to get started on it, but there'll be some travel headaches for sure for a lot of folks coming to and from the airport for the next year and a half.
And we're scheduled to start that project when?
April 3rd, and completion date of October 2024. And yeah, it's going to be quite the challenge, I think, to again accommodate a record number of travelers through the airport. We'll have increased shuttle activity to and from the economy lot, so try to make that experience as pleasant as possible. But yeah, it'll be quite a challenge for a while.
If public service announcement, if you are a business traveler that's comfortable with typically parking in that short-term parking directly right across from the terminal, Sioux Falls, South Dakota in general, we don't like to have to walk more than a few feet really to get inside. We will be running shuttles, but ultimately I think it's going to start here in the next 30
about
days.
3 weeks, yeah.
Yeah, about 30 days. We're going to displace a lot of that parking out there. So do your best to spread some happy news whenever you go out to the airport for the next couple months. We did show a few of these pictures, but there'll be more on the parking ramp here at the end. Tom, didn't want to leave you sitting over there for too long. Tom Schauer, Mead Hunt, the consultants that were brought in to work through what is the master plan and probably the meat of what we're going to talk about today. So Tom, why don't you do a really quick introduction? I think a lot of people know Dan, but can you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your experience here?
Yeah, my name's Tom Schauer, Senior Aviation Advisor for Mead Hunt. Some of you who've been around in the aviation have known me. Prior to coming to the consulting world, I worked 24 years with the Federal Aviation Administration, where I served anywhere from the Airports District Office Manager, where I oversaw a grant program for North and South Dakota. I served as a regional engineer dealing with projects anywhere from O'Hare, Detroit Metro to South Dakota. So kind of covered the whole gambit of things. Having said that, we're embarking, or have been working on the master plan at Sioux Falls. And a lot of people go, what is that master plan? Well, you heard them talking just a little bit about parking. As you look at an airport the size of Sioux Falls, you have general aviation airport, or general aviation traffic. That could be your small recreational person. That could be your business jets. In addition to that, you have your passenger airlines. You have your air ambulance, you have your guard, you have your cargo, you have helicopter operations, you have all these different things that go on. So in a master plan, what we do is we come in and assess what facilities you have, what's going on. We reach out to the public and to the tenants and the users of the airfield, find out where their issues are, what are the problems, what can we do. So once we have those issues, just a very simple problem solving format, it's just that airports are very complex because of all the different users and blending all those needs. So what we do is we look at those, we work out what solutions are available that meet everybody's needs. And that's one of the things, you look at an airport like Sioux Falls, you guys have incredible growth in your community, incredible growth at your airfield, and sadly, you have very limited space to develop on your airport. So that's one of the things as we go forward, we're looking at how do you balance that highest and best use? What do you look at for the future? And so as we go through it, that's one of the things that we're going through and we're working out. We've come up with most of the proposed solutions. So you're going to be seeing in the next month a public briefing where we talk a little bit about, here's where we think we're going and get additional public input. And so that's kind of what's involved in a master plan. We'll talk a little more about some of those pieces, I think, later.
How often do we do master planning?
Airport master plans, the FAA recommends probably about every 7 to 10 years. What I tend to tell people is look at what's going on at your airport in your community. If your plan isn't right at the time, let's look at it and readjust. aviation has changed throughout the years. I've been doing this for 30 plus years. And when I first started in the industry, the more traffic you had, the bigger planes you'd get. Well, if you look, we don't see a lot of big planes. We see more and more planes, regional jets, things like that. So technology changes, industry changes, the needs of your community change. So if you have big things that change, we strongly recommend you reevaluate, recalibrate your direction. Some of those can be a whole redo of your master plan. Other ones can be just a very focused niche change.
Dan, we have our last master plan was 2013.
Right.
Okay. So if you are interested in what the last master plan looked like, it is linked on the website out at Sioux Falls Regional Airport. Tom, really quick though, like when we talk about master planning, specifically for this conversation, those focus areas, I think it's up on the slide. I can't see the slide. So the terminals 1, runways and taxiways, air traffic controller, so that tower that we have, air cargo, general aviation, and then anything else that's specific to Sioux Falls Regional?
The biggest couple things like you talk about is the air traffic control tower, and we're looking at just preserving places for that. So as we kind of dug into this, we didn't start with our new terminal involved, but we started looking where the air traffic control towers could be in the future. The existing air traffic control tower is roughly 50 years old, give or take. Somewhere along the line, it's got to be reconstructed. Where can you put them? There's all kinds of rules the FAA has for those. Last thing we want to do is overdevelop your airfield where there's no spot to build a new one. So we kind of look at those opportunities. When we were looking at it, it kind of dragged into, well, let's talk about the terminal. As that goes forward, that may suck up the existing space or not. So again, a lot of your airfield discussions are balancing of that, as well as the air cargo. We're all familiar with e-commerce. I don't know if anybody here hasn't ordered something off of the internet in the last 24 hours, I'd be amazed. And I'm an abuser of that, so my wife will recognize that if she looks at her credit card. But as you go through that, where is that going? And a lot of times we look at the growth of aviation, and we'd all like to think that growth is nice, easy slope that goes up, and we can plan for it, and that's the way it works. That's not how it works. Somebody's going to walk in one day and say, hey, I'd like to put in an Amazon facility. And they're going to go to Dan, and Dan's going to go, okay, where do we put it? Our job as master planners is to say, Dan, here's where you can put it. If somebody walks in today, here's what it looks like. Some of the balancing acts when you look at that is when you develop anything on your airport with the amount of federal funds you get, everything's tied to environmental, what funds you have available. I know one of the young ladies talked about understanding federal funding. I've been doing this for 35 years. I'm going to call you later and you can explain it to me because I haven't figured it out yet. But that's one of the things as we look at it. It's a balancing act. If you look in your airfield, we highlighted areas on there because you really do have a very finite amount of developable space. And the reality is once it's gone, it's gone. I know in one of our early meetings, somebody asked about relocating the airport. In a prior life, I was involved with the relocation of a new airport up in Williston, North Dakota in the middle of the oil boom. Roughly that cost about $300 million, and it was much smaller than Sioux Falls. With today's numbers, you're talking over $1 billion. So relocating your airports are really not an option. So it's one of those things we want to make sure that we position you to use the highest and best use of your properties.
Well, you mentioned a lot in that conversation right there, that point. There is a process that's in plan for actually going through this, and we are in phase 3 of that process, correct?
Correct.
Do you want to really quick just kind of talk about what the first 2 phases of that process were like?
And you kind of like to talk about a little bit earlier. The first phase is really the data gathering, the fact gathering. I know, again, one of the ladies talked about this is the first time I actually took my own research and just airport master planning is that way. We come in, we do the research. Every decision, every plan alternative we should have is based on facts and data on your airport. And so we gather the data. In addition to that, we talk to, as I said, your tenants and your airfield, your staff, and we put together all those into one picture. And we say, okay, here's the data, here's what we need, here's what the industry is saying. Then we look at and kind of forecast whether it's passengers, whether it's cargo, whether it's general aviation. And we kind of put all these needs next to what you have. And so right now we're just finalizing and putting together the alternatives that will meet those needs. And then as we come out, we'll tell you where we think there's some maybe material weaknesses as a long-term plan. And then we'll go in through the implementation plan, which is often the hardest because that's where you start tying money to needs. And I don't know if anybody here has got a solution to that, but I always have more needs than I have money. So I think the airport's in the same boat.
Yeah, we'll get to a lot of that. We'll talk about funding. We'll talk about some of those things. Specifically, though, I wanted to bring up, you mentioned tenants. And just as a quick reminder for the audience, when we talk about the Sioux Falls Regional Airport, we're talking about a couple of key tenants. Obviously, passengers and carriers is going to be the first one that we're going to look at. Air cargo is the second one. Currently, we have UPS, we have FedEx. We also have general mail carriers. Ultimately, I think FedEx and UPS carry the bulk of both of those for the USPS. And then we have a brand new facility that's in town. Somebody tell me, 3 million square feet, is it roughly? Amazon facility. So we're looking at, in the 10-year master plan, to kind of look at what is Amazon's needs going to be when it comes there. Are they going to start bringing wide bodies in, bringing their own, carrying their own instead of actually flying through UPS?
Right.
Through UPS.
Does. Yeah.
Yep, who currently fills them. And then we have a couple other tenants. The other tenants would be like the private aviation side, the GA side, Maverick, Signature, those types, private individuals who have planes. And then another one that's big, that's kind of not talked about a lot, but often synonymous with the airport, is the South Dakota International Guard. And so they would be the fourth major tenant that's out there. But Dan, talk to us a little bit. We talked about phasing. The number one item, and I'm going to skip past this challenge slide, but there are some challenges that obviously come up with our airport. We're going to get to funding. We're going to get to timing. But let's talk about the number one point when it comes to the 10-year master plan that's on the docket for today, and that's the terminal.
Yep.
Can you talk to us a little bit about the terminal in general? This has been a topic for a number of years, but we are now getting to the point where we have to critically think about this in the next 10 years and what we're going to be doing with our terminal.
Yeah, certainly as the community has grown and the passenger traffic has grown, in the last 10, 12 years, we've invested over $50 million just in the terminal building. So whether that's, we've expanded the ticketing area, new baggage screening area, new security checkpoint, baggage claim area. The concourse has gone through an expansion and even a renovation already for restaurant facilities. The most expensive bathroom in South Dakota, the Priority Pet bathroom.
Required by the FAA, by the way.
And it does get used more than you think. So we certainly invested a great deal. But as we look at, in partnership with our master plan, we've also conducted a terminal study that looks at our facility, looks at the forecasted number of enplanements, flight operations, and what our facility needs to make sure that we're not behind the 8 ball, that we're planning ahead, that we have the facility that's able to accommodate the expected growth. And in one area that's really, and not too surprisingly for us, but one area is the concourse, having the additional gates to meet not only current demand, but future demand. And that involves certainly a study. We came up with 3 different alternatives to come up with the additional gates. Right now we have 7 gates. We can actually park 10 planes at those. But in the next 15 years, that'll need to grow to at least 14 gates. The first phase of that project, again, we looked at 3 different alternatives and narrowed it down to one that would add 5 gates onto the concourse facility. One factor that was important to us is while we went through this construction period of probably 18 months at least, we weren't impacting more than at least 1 gate at a time, because again, the need for our current need is we're actually full overnight with the gates that we have now and certain times of the day. So trying to minimize any disruption to our current operation while we went through this lengthy expansion project. So that was a main driver for what was selected, but pretty excited about it. It's would be a initial 5-gate expansion, would add space for other retail, more restaurants, bars, seating areas would provide. Currently, we do have a customs facility, but it's only for general aviation flights only. So, if we were trying to partner with the carrier for a new flight from Cancun directly to Sioux Falls, right now it's just not in the cards. But this facility would allow for a flight to directly come in and then be processed through an FIS facility right there on the concourse. So that's early stages of development on the plans, but within the next 2 to 3 years, we would like to get started on that. I think the bigger piece is how do we combine a financing plan that will allow us to move forward with it.
Not the funding on that, but just as a point, when you're looking at the slide that's up here, you're looking at the preferred alternative. There were 2 other additional alternatives that Dan mentioned earlier. This is the one that that we are potentially moving forward with. So if I can explain a little bit, the orange area is our current terminal space that we have that you see up there. When Dan talks about phase 1, I can't see the number that it's called out for, but it would be an additional.
I think letter A, I think, is on there. Is there a letter A?
I'm not quite sure. But needless to say, I call it the hammerhead. So phase 1 is really going to be the hammerhead. That's kind of the extension off the end. That's that square, which allows additional gates to be built out along there. That would only disrupt basically one gate at a time, which would allow us to continue operations as an airport. And then phase 2, which we could add at the same time, we could add in the future based on demand, so on and so forth, is that kind of that Y that comes off of the other side on the right hand there. And that would allow us to have an additional, 7 more gates, 7 additional gates on that.
Get to a total of 14.
For a total of 14. And we don't have any interior kind of mock-ups at this point, but we are going to be releasing those in the next couple of weeks, I believe. And that's more of the dreaming phase. But let's talk to that a little bit. So, you talk about additional gates. Obviously, then you have to have additional flights, and you possibly have additional carriers coming in. Dan, is it oftentimes people think, why doesn't the airport have X or Y for destinations? Talk to us about how carriers choose to come into a market and the influence that we either have or do not have on that.
Well, ultimately, it's up to the carriers on where they fly, how often they fly, what equipment they fly. We try to play a part. Certainly, there are some destinations that, based on where people are flying already, that maybe might be better served with a nonstop route. So we meet with all of our carriers on a regular basis. We have been fortunate, again, to have a robust economy, quick recovery from the pandemic, and a growing population, people moving to the area that has supported growth and fills the flights up. Airlines respond to that. They see the flights, the load factors on the flights. They see the amount of revenue that they're generating, and that does more than anything to help convince an airline to come here. But it's been a challenge. The pilot shortage has dramatically impacted the level of service in small communities with regional jets primarily, which has been a focal point of our service here on United, Delta, and American. That's been a challenge. They don't have the pilots. There's hundreds of aircraft that are parked. And what we've seen is airlines actually upgauge that to a larger aircraft, so 737 or Airbus A320 to replace that smaller regional jet. But instead of 6 flights a day to Chicago or Minneapolis, you maybe have 3 now. So the seats may be fairly the same, it's just with a bigger plane with less frequency. But what that does is, even in Sioux Falls, there are peaks and valleys of service. So again, I mentioned if you could have 1 flight a day to Atlanta, it's they wanted to leave first thing in the morning and then come back at night. So all of our gates are full at night with doing operations like that. Or you may have middle of the day or late afternoon, again, kind of a peak period of time. You go through there at 9 o'clock in the day and say, well, there's no flights here, so why do they need more gates? It's like at when we didn't have enough gates, or 5 in the evening we didn't have enough gates. So so that's the challenge, to not only accommodate our current demand, but also having that facility available for growth to come. And we actually had a carrier that wanted to make Sioux Falls a crew base and maintenance base that would have required at least 3 large aircraft here overnight. And we just don't have the room now. So it's impacting decisions now. That carrier would have probably added at least 4 to 5 more stops to leisure destinations if we had that crew base here. So the hope is if and when we expand the concourse, that we'll be able to revisit that.
Tom, talk to us about 14. I mean, in the master planning process, how did we land on 14?
What we look at is for those of you that may or may not know, it's kind of like church. You don't build your church for, say, well, look, there's 500 people at service today. Well, geez, so we split them out and everybody came every hour. We could reduce it down to 20. You deal with your terminals just like you do with your church. You look at that peak hour and you try to build to that. We also look at then the destination. So you look at the destinations you have. What Dan refers to is people that are there in the morning. We call them RONs, remain overnight. So we look at all these different factors and we look at your growth of passengers and what are likely destinations that would come into yours. So we work with like our air service specialists and we look at what would be likely things to happen that are real and when would they want to operate at your airport. A lot of people go, well, can't you just say, hey, like Dan said, we have an opening at 10 o'clock, come in at 10, we got plenty of space. Well, those flights have to connect in through hubs and either from arrivals or destinations and tie in. So airlines are looking for very specific timing. And that's why what you see is in airports is like your morning shoves. They're flying into the hubs of Minneapolis to Denver to Atlanta. So as we look at those, we're trying to target that with your growth and what does that look like? In addition, you add in the complexities of the upgauge in aircraft. Like Dan said, is we were doing regional jets that handled 50 to 70 passengers. Well, if we start moving to 120 passenger aircraft, our numbers are going to go down for a while, but eventually we catch up with that. As pilots become, more in abundance, we'll probably see some of that coming back. So a lot of this is a balancing act. There's no crystal ball. So a lot of times you're going to hear on any of the forecasting things or planning, what you hear from me, it's always maintaining flexibility to react to the future because you just don't know exactly how it's going to work out. That's where the 14 is, that balance of not spending too much money, but leaving enough to react for what's coming.
Well, you mentioned money. Time and money seem to make the world go round. Let's talk a little bit about what it's going to take to make this project actually go forward.
Well, certainly a bit of sticker shock, working with our Mead Hunt and some other consultants. The price of construction really isn't a surprise. It's gone up considerably. But airport construction really has jumped almost 4 times what it was just a few years ago. So, this project to add 4 to 5 gates, the design and construction right now is estimated to be over $130 million, and that's just the first phase. That's not talking about any other improvements or even the second phase of this project, which would be considerably more. So just focusing on the near term, $130 million. That's well over what the city invested in the Premier Center just a few years ago. So it's quite an eye opener, and we can just choose to ignore that. That's not reality, except you look at other airports in the upper Midwest that have embarked on construction projects, terminal projects, concourse projects, and I mean that's what they're seeing. So it's not just pulling numbers out of the air; it's proven, and it's not Los Angeles, it's not New York, it's in the Midwest where you would expect similar construction. So that's a challenge, and it's not from a lack of a need. It's going to be a challenge of putting together a financing plan with all the partners and everyone that benefits from the airport here, working together to make it work.
What does that mean when you say all the partners? There's a number of players, if you will, in this funding package. Who are they?
Well, certainly the primary funding source will be the federal government, but asking them for $130 million, well, that's not happening. We would be fortunate to secure a little over half of that from the federal government. But even if we're willing to secure that funding, they're going to want to know that there's local support, local skin in the game, so to speak. Actually, we have a bill in front of the legislature right now. May not go through this year, but we'll be back next year for sure to secure over $20 million in annual appropriation for airports in South Dakota, for facility infrastructure. And that would be one piece of it. But certainly we'll look the airport itself. We like to pride ourselves. We have no debt. Well, that's going to change pretty quickly. We'll have a fair amount of debt to take on this challenge. But certainly the local community as well will certainly look for support from those folks.
Well, I know we have a lot more. We're not going to get through. We could do 2 programs, I think, on this in total. But obviously, the terminal is the big piece for the next 10-year plan that we're working through right now. There's some other areas, runways being one of those. Do you want to really quick just kind of touch base on the specifics of how the runways actually impact our 10-year plan?
Well, we're actually in pretty good shape when it comes to the 10-year plan. Our primary runway, 9,000-foot runway, we just wrapped up really our 4th phase of reconstruction over the last 10 years, over $50 million investment to completely reconstruct that runway. And that should hopefully be good for the next 30, 40 years. Our secondary runway, we also last year did a major rehab project on that to repair areas. And both of those, they're adjoining taxiways. We did numerous terminal and general aviation apron repairs over the last couple of years. So there really isn't, from an airfield standpoint, too many major projects that we're looking at.
Tom, with this audience here specifically, a lot of business community in the downtown area, economic growth, economic development is something that's near and dear to a lot of the conversations that we have around here. When we talk about runways, we have to talk about approaches. How do approaches and runways impact, and I guess I'm going to tie in the tower discussion as well into this, just based on time. Can you talk a little bit about how an airport needs to work with the development community and the landowners around an airport in order to secure the space that's needed for those planes to come in?
Absolutely. As we look at our runways that you have at the airfield, what we look at, runways like roads don't just stop at the end of the pavement. They're corridors that go off the end of each runway up and go up at roughly a 3% or 3 degree slope. And so as we look at those, we're looking at all kinds of surfaces where aircraft come through. So like right now, I'll just give you an example, is runway 33. As you come in, comes right over downtown Sioux Falls. You have the prison that's up on the hill that has things that impact that approach. And we talk about approaches, what does that mean? It's your visibility that you can come in. So as you're flying in, the more obstacles you have, one, we make sure it's safe. So there's no obstacles for flight. But as you get more and more clouds, more and more weather, if the obstacles start getting closer in, it still may be safe, but you need to see where you're going or have electronic equipment that can show you where you're going. And so as we look at all these things, it's kind of a blending of all that to make sure pilots can fly in safely without hitting any buildings, any structures. So as you're developing in and around an airport, people don't often look or think about how far out that impacts. An instrument approach to the end of the runway goes out 50,000 feet. So they go out a long ways and they continue out, but at that point you're quite high. So as you look at development in the downtown area, your cranes, your building heights, I strongly recommend you work closely with Dan and their staff to make sure it's not going to impact flight. There's requirements under Federal Aviation Regulation Part 77 that you have to submit to the FAA. That'll count as coordination. In addition to that, we're working with the airport authority to help the cities and counties look at zoning to make sure this information is out there a little earlier. Last thing we want to do is see somebody spend a lot of money on development that can't be built. So we're working on compatible land use, and part of that compatible land use deals with heights and how it impacts the airfield.
And lastly, we have a slide up, I believe that is our tower. Our tower was built in 1966-67 timeframe. Currently with the master plan, we have to look at maybe repositioning that tower.
One of the things, as I said early on, is the amount of space you have on the airport is very limited. So where we look at highest and best use, air traffic control needs to be able to see what they refer to as the movement area. So any place that aircraft are moving and in control by the air traffic. So where air traffic gives you directions. So like when you depart from the terminal directly, you're not really under air traffic control, but there's a line in the pavement that says, okay, they'll stop here, they'll talk to the tower. And from that point on, they're under tower control. So when we look at that, you have to look at places that have visibility to see all ends of the runway. When you think about that, you got, 5,000 feet this way, 5,000 feet that way. You got to have something that's visually. So when you look at a tower, I'm speculating your new control tower will likely be, it's probably 60 feet now. It'll be well over 160 feet in the future. And we're working with another location where the building on the ground is a significant larger footprint than what you have today, just because they're taking everything out of the control tower, putting it on a ground base, but they're putting the controllers up higher. So as we look at that, the last thing we want to do is leave you vulnerable to not having a spot for it.
Well, I could keep talking about this. I know we could as well. I see a lot of people are starting to pull out. It's 5 after 12. I just want to say thank you very much for everyone. When we start talking about Sioux Falls Regional Airport, obviously we're talking about an economic growth engine. There will be many, many conversations coming up when it comes to the Sioux Falls Regional Airport in the coming weeks, months, and I would say even the next year, as we look at expanding into a new parking garage, expanding a terminal, and obviously trying to secure some funding to be able to make those projects happen. So thank you to Dan, thank you to Tom for spending some time with us, and thank you for everybody else for giving us an extra 5 minutes today.
I too would like to extend my appreciation to having you all here. Let's have you back soon. And Eric, thank you for such an interesting, truly fascinating conversation. The visuals were fabulous as well. Hopefully I will see many of you at the Summit League tournament. We will not meet next week as a result. So looking ahead at March 13th, let's fill the room again with our legislative recap. Thank you all for being here. Rotary is adjourned.